to talk about re-budgeting. So let's just start by having a conversation about what things we've already talked about re-budgeting. We started, I think, the first time we mentioned it was when we did the chapter on master budgeting, right? Where we had our overhead and our labor and our materials and our SG&A and our cash flow budgets, right? Those were all surrounding operations. Then we just had a chapter on standard costing, which is really a budget for what? 1 unit. Standard costing is a budget for 1 unit. How much does it cost, or should it cost, to manufacture 1 unit? This chapter on capital budgeting is addressing budgeting for long-term projects. And these are the kinds of things it's talking about. It's talking about capital asset projects. Do I want to replace my equipment? And if so, do I want to lease it or buy it? How do I select what kind of equipment I'm going to replace? Am I going to buy a new plant or expand my existing one, or maybe acquire another company to vertically integrate my organization? How am I approaching my long-term strategies? And if I do buy new equipment, what's that going to do to my cost structure? Right? So it's going to increase my depreciation, which is overhead, fixed overhead. But hopefully it's going to decrease, for example, my direct labor costs or my utility costs. Or it's going to handle my direct materials more conservatively, so reduce those costs. So, I mean, these are very, very complex decisions that honestly can make or break a company. We just went last night and saw that Steve Jobs movie. Has anybody seen it? Fantastic movie. Fantastic movie. And, I mean, all of these things were integral. I mean, from a business standpoint, it was incredibly fascinating to me. All of these and driving which direction they wanted to go with product development was all a piece of making or breaking Apple. And at one point, they were 90 days from insolvency in 1998. Right? He was valued at $500 million in 1988. By 1998, their market share had dropped to 2% because a series of bad decisions really kind of up here. Product direction decisions. Okay, so how do we make these incredibly important capital budgeting decisions? Well, we're going to study 3 methods of doing it. Payback, internal rate of return, and net present value. And the first method, also let me just say, the methods we're studying in this chapter are only surrounding cash flow, which is one piece of many when you really make these decisions. But since we're accountants and we're not product engineers and we're not marketers, our piece of the big executive team puzzle is calculating the cash flows from the different projects. But it is not the beginning and the end. In fact, if you only use cash flow, you're probably going to end up making erroneous decisions. But again, this is our piece, so this is what we're studying. The first method, payback, is a shallow method because it does not use the time value of money. The heck does that mean? Okay. So let me just make this perfectly clear because I know you guys can't hear Jess. I can barely hear her. She's lost her voice. So let me just say the first thing again. The payback method is just a really quick and dirty method. It doesn't really have, you would never use it for an authentic long-term decision-making process. It's just a really super quick scan because it does not use the time value of money. And then I said, what's the time value of money? And Jess said, you guys should have all studied this in personal finance. or financial planning, whatever that's called. Anybody else want to weigh in? Jess said she thought it was because of inflation, and it's not an inflationary issue.
Isn't it like that as time goes on, like the value of money decreases?
Why? No, so is $1 today the same as $1 in 2 years? Why not?
Because the value changes.
How? If I have $1, if I said to you, do you want $5,000 today or do you want $5,000 in 2 years? What would you say? Today, please. How come?
Because he knows what it'll be worth in 5 years.
You're skirting around it. What would I do? Say that I didn't want to spend the $5,000. What would I do with it? I could invest it. And what would it be worth in 2 years?
More.
Something more than $5,000.
Hopefully.
Right. Well, we're assuming the validity of compounded interest. This doesn't have anything to do with inflation or deflation or purchasing power. It has to do with the power of money over time. Why are we told to start saving for retirement when we're 25? Because your money compounds for 40 years because of interest. And then you get interest on the interest and interest on the interest on the interest. That's called compounding. So if you do that pretty faithfully for 40 years, I can almost damn well guarantee you that you're going to be set at retirement. If you wait till you're 35, what do you got to do? Put in a bunch more every month. If you wait till you're 45 or 50, which looks like what most Americans do statistically, basically you better be coming up with $2,000-3,000 a month to put away because you've lost that time value of money, right? Payback method does not take into consideration the time value of money. It just says if I'm going to invest $2 million and it's going to reduce my cost $50,000 a year, my payback is 40 years. Is that really a true statement? It's going to take 40 years to pay it back? Because you've got all that interest. Okay. But it's a super easy way to scan projects. We just had our house priced out for solar installation, and the payback was 17 years. And I said to the guy, when you get to 10, I'm in. $20,000, put up the panels, install them right, and it reduces my electric bill, $1,800 a year. 17-year payback. Too long, sorry. Get it to 10 and I'm in. So that's not really how long it's going to take to pay back, but it's an easy scan, isn't it? Okay. The next two methods we're going to spend a lot of time on. They do use, and it's right in the name, present value. They use the present value of money. The internal rate of return also uses the present value of money. And you would never make a capital budgeting decision without really running one or both of these. And these two, net present value and IRR, are going to give you the exact same decision. So your decision can either be yay or nay, I go with it or I don't, like my example with solar. Or I'm looking at 3 different options. Expanding my plant, buying another company to manufacture that project, or building a whole new plant in another place. So then I'm going to use these methods to rate them, 1, 2, 3. So it can be used to either say yay or nay to a project, or it can be used to rate between options that are all viable. So when you start looking at these projects, what are we talking about? Let's use the example for solar. In fact, Google has made a commitment to be net zero energy by 2025. So they're very busy right now putting solar and wind and biomass in all of their facilities. My son's a construction engineer. He works on them. This big piece of what he does in San Francisco. Super interesting. So what kinds of things does Google look at when they're making the decision? Well, our old boilers and our old traditional HVAC systems had repairs and maintenance, and those cost X per year. Now, solar's not without, R&M is what we call repairs and maintenance in the accounting world. Solar has plenty of R&M. In fact, the lifespan of commercial solar panels are about 25 years. So you've got to look at R&M there. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to have any. So what's the difference? How much is it going to cost me to get into these things? You know, Google's got a $10 million, I'm just making that number up, but say a $10 million investment to get solar and biomass and wind on all their facilities. Do I have incremental operating costs, or does it decrease my operating costs? Well, obviously, if you go in and start using clean energy, what's going to happen to your utility bill? Yeah, it's going to go down or disappear completely. So incremental means up or down, right? Higher or lower. And working capital, that doesn't really pertain to the example of solar panels, but working capital is in order to fund this project or keep it viable, I'm going to need to release a certain amount of working capital and make it available for the project. That's not a good example with the solar, so I'm just going to leave that for the moment. How do I get money coming in from capital budgeting projects? Well, first off, salvage value. I'm going to sell all my commercial boilers and my HVAC components that are reclaimable. And that's money coming in the door today, isn't it? Salvage value from the old project. What about salvage value at the end of the life of the solar panels? 25 years, are they going to be worth anything? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe for parts they are. So you'd have to take a look at that. Maybe my $10 million worth of solar panels, I can sell them for $100,000 in 25 years. You're going to get depreciation over the life of them on your books, on your P&L, and that's going to save you taxes. And that has to go into the equation too. This gets complicated quick. Did everybody catch what I just said about depreciation? So those $10 million solar panels, we all know from an income tax perspective, what am I going to do with them over the course of their life? I'm going to depreciate them. So say, and this isn't how it works in tax, but say that I depreciate them straight line over 10 years. I get $1 million a year write-off on my profit and loss. So does that save me $1 million in taxes? Does it? No, it saves me $1 million times my tax rate. If I have $1 million write-off, it doesn't save me $1 million in taxes. It's a deduction. So I've got to take that $1 million times my tax rate. It saves me $300,000 in taxes. That is a cash inflow.
Is depreciation, is it captured as a reduction of your costs, or is it counted as like salvage value?
You can put it anywhere you want. I would probably put it as an increase in cash flow, because my tax bill just went down by $300,000. What about the salvage value of my old HVAC system? That's in today's dollars, right? What about the salvage value if I think I can part out these, like my silicon's going to be fried on my solar panels, but maybe the actual frames or whatever are salvageable. I think I'm going to sell them in 25 years for, say, $500,000. So is that like $500,000 a day? Heck no, it's probably, I'm just making this number up off the top of my head, it's maybe $123,000 in today's dollars. So I've got to take that amount way out in the future and present value it back to today's dollars. You see how complicated this gets pretty quick? And you don't want to screw up on these decisions, because these huge decisions really are make or break stuff in the long term. Incremental revenues. Are my solar panels going to help me generate any incremental revenue? Probably not. But if I was going into a new piece of equipment that was going to allow me to produce new kinds of products, then that would clearly generate incremental revenues. Reduction of costs, clearly. Okay. See, these are all the kinds of things you have to look at. Time value of money. $1 today is worth more than $1 a year from now. Therefore, projects that promise earlier returns are more valuable or preferable to those that promise later returns. They're also what? More or less risky. If I'm going to be generating, again, back to the solar panels, payback in 10 years, is that more or less risky than somebody telling me 17 years? Really? No, it's less. Why is it less?
Because you're getting your money back.
We have no idea what's going to happen to technology, right? Energy technology. So if I'm pushing something on 17 or 27 years, I mean, for God's sake, in 27 years, I mean, I would hope everyone's got a wind turbine on top of their building, right? It's just going to be super status quo, right? So the sooner something pays back, the less risk because of shifting technologies, global variety or variables. I mean, a bazillion things can happen, right? So I always want to know something sooner rather than later. So what we have to do, what we are doing, and what we're going to learn about is called discounted cash flows. How do I look into the future, determine what I think is going to happen, and then pull those future amounts back to today's dollars? Because I can't compare something in 3 years to something in 9 years. I've got to bring it all back to the same basis. Remember the guy scratching his head with flexible budget, apples and oranges? Same thing here. Everything has to be on the same basis, and that basis is today's dollars. Does that make sense? Payback method. This is the one that what? Does or doesn't use time value of money? It doesn't. All you use that for is a what? Super quick scan, just super like I'm just telling you. Okay, and let me posit this. So they come out there and tell you it's going to be $20,000 to get your house on solar, and you're going to save $1,800 a year in energy costs. And I'm just doing this in my head super quick. So it's like 12 or 13 years. Let's see the payback was. Why is that not even really valid? What is that assuming?
That your energy bill stays exact.
Hello, that my energy bill stays the same. I mean, do our energy bills stay the same? Heck no. Here's the thing. Okay, and that's an excellent point, and that's inherent in all this. First wave of a new technology, they're called disruptive technologies. The only people that buy them are early adopters. They're risk takers. This movie last night was a great example. The first generation people bought Apple II. They did not buy into the Mac. It fell flat on its face, right? I'm not an early adopter. I didn't buy the first Prius. I didn't buy the first solar panels. I'm super aligned with all that, but I want to see. I'm risk averse. I'm more likely to buy as a product matures when I'm pretty sure that most of the efficiencies have been solved and most of the bugs have been worked out, right? So, super good point. When are you buying into whatever the new plant, technology, equipment, et cetera is? Right now, a lot of transportation companies are looking at electric vehicles, right? But the technology is so new and the battery storage is kind of wonky. So companies are a little, they want to do it. They're trying to get aligned with their climate action plans, but it's a little early, right? So that's all inherent. All you do to figure out payback method is say, how much is my investment required divided by annual net cash inflow? So the solar panels are 20 grand. It's going to cut my energy bill by $1,800 a year. That's it. My payback period is, X, 12.2 years or whatever it is. That is not accounting for the fact that $1,800 in year 7 or year 10 or year 12 is not the same as today. Now, is that helpful? We also had a guy come out and take a look at installing a subterranean geothermal system, which is what we use at the university for our energy, right? Because we have an aquifer here, and the water stays at the same temperature, 50 degrees, very close to the surface, easy to heat. You run coils through your house. That was a $60,000 system. And saved me $2,500 a year on my energy. Holy shit, I'm not going to be alive that long. That payback period was like, ew, right? So that's how you analyze stuff like that. Just for a super quick scan, like I'm not even going to go any further on the geothermal system because I can tell you it's just too far out. But I am going to look at the wind and the solar. I'm going to go to the next step. I'm going to look at the net present value and the internal rate of return.
Now, when you're doing that, you're using the solar panels based on the house. So when a company uses it, they have to use it based on their environment around them.
Sure.
Do they not? Because, I mean,
Sure.
they have solar panels out in the middle of the desert at the moment.
I'm talking about rooftop.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is they put them out instead of over their roof.
Sure.
The only problem is with so many of them, they were disrupting the environment.
Well, yeah, and they were also melting. Yeah, there's been a lot of problems with those big solar farms. So what's the problem with payback? Just what we just said, ignores the time value of money. Shorter payback doesn't always mean a more desirable investment. For example, if I'm a company looking at geothermal versus solar, in 25 years, the solar's over. I've got to replace them. Whereas the geothermal has a life in perpetuity. So shorter doesn't mean better. It just means quick scan. And it totally ignores the cash flow after the payback period. So once I've got back my original 20 grand or 60 grand, am I still harvesting the energy savings? Sure, but is that in the equation at all? No. So lots of shortcomings, but still everybody does them. You might not put them down on paper and talk about them in a board meeting, but it's something we all think about all the time when we make decisions, don't we? It might not always be quantitative, but it's like, oh, I'm going to get we went to Costco last night before the movie and somebody was carrying out one of those juicers. That's all the rage now, right? I'm going to juice. And I mean, they're like $400. But you got to know, part of the thing is I spend, $30 a week buying smoothies, or I'm going to buy this juicer. So in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pay this thing back in 3.5 months, right? Okay, we've already talked about this. Serves as a screening tool, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The reality of all this, though, is that nothing is even in cash flows. For example, is your energy bill the same every single year?
No.
Pretending that the costs were the same, is it going to be the same every year? Why not?
Well, in the wintertime, it could get colder than it was the year before.
That's weather. It's climate. Right? 2 years ago, we had a brutal winter, and now we're in El Nino. Right? Did you guys see what is happening in Southern Cal from El Nino? The great white sharks are all coming in because the food chain's changed. I have 2 friends down there that surf. I'm like, what? Did you see that article on NPR? Oh, I know. No, horrible, horrible flooding. Yep.
And all the counties are going to be spending money because they've got to repair all these.
Yeah, they need seawalls. They need big seawalls down there. So most things don't come in even bursts. So pretend again that this was the solar panels. And so I look, and you would do this, in all honesty, particularly if you were putting up $20 million worth of solar panels at Google. You're going to look at climate patterns in Silicon Valley, which is where they are, right, for the last 50 years, and say, is it the same every year? Well, no, climate cycles. What's happening to our climate is changing. You're going to ingest those projections into it, and you can see that your payback's not going to be even. So then you're just going to do the math and say, okay, I'm going to get $1,000 back the first year. I'm going to break even the second, 2,000 the third year, so on and so forth. So you're just eating away at the payback, right? So back to the 20,000. 20,000 minus 1,000. Now I still have 19 grand to pay back. Minus 0 is still 19,000. Minus 2, I've got 17 grand to pay back. See what I'm saying? It's just very much a manual exercise of subtracting your payback every year. Okay, I'm going to move now to the smartboard to do this because they make this sound like this is like really easy, cushy kind of cute little thing to do, and it's kind of not. it can't be. I will tell you something kind of funny. This just speaks, not macking on young people, but I've been writing slides and pedagogical aids for textbooks for 20 years. In the last 2 years, the comments have been, particularly with my income tax slides, you need less words and more cartoon figures. Yeah, less numbers, less calculations, less words, more dancing bears. And I'm like,
is that what we're getting right now?
no, you're getting numbers. Because you can't teach income tax with dancing bears. And I mean, it's just, and you get all these editorial reviews just saying that, young people's span of attention with social media or blah, 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 is under about 8 seconds per concept. So if you don't convey the concept within 8 seconds, you've lost them. And, I mean, I'm writing back my editors going, then, you're probably just going to need to find a different publisher because, I mean, I'm not, you can't convey these concepts in 8 seconds. And I'm not going to try, and I don't want to.
You're almost down to goldfish, 3 seconds. Come on, yeah. Come on.
How does that bode for the future? I mean, are you kidding me? They have whole classes now in teaching kids, and I'm not kidding you because my kids just got out of college a couple years ago. They spend time in their English class teaching the kids that you can't write a professional email like you text. I.e., you use a U instead of spell out U and a B instead of B-E.
Yeah, I had a professor over on the mountain campus specifically say we're not to use slang or emoticons in emails.
God, no! I mean, wow! Or my email address on my resume is, hot chick at Google. It's like, I mean, like this is a professional document. I mean, shocking to me.
Wait till you call it into their answering machine.
Oh yeah, dude, not in. I'll party it. Really?
Yeah, the ringback sound every time.
When Cheryl was in internship class last semester, she was talking about those kinds of things.
Shocking.
You don't get the job, and then you're wondering why you don't get called.
Wow, Yep. I'll also tell you something else too. Both of my kids, their companies, what's that called? Scrubbed all their social media when they hired them, but said, know that we check, and that you get one scrub, and now you got the job. If we need to scrub your account again, that's on you, and you're not professionally representing this company, and that's grounds for dismissal. I don't know exactly what the parameters are, but I know they each got one scrub. And I mean, my kids don't Facebook anymore because why would you? Why would you put yourself in that situation professionally?
I'm always like looking through, and if I have friends that are posting things that I don't feel are appropriate for my young niece and nephews, then I'm like, I didn't post. I mean, I'm part of one person because she was doing just like really out there.
Okay, so here's the scoop. First off, you have to know the difference between an annuity and a lump sum. And when we look at cash flows from projects, that's the very first thing you need to decide. What am I talking about? So let's start by defining what each of these are. An annuity is a series of equal cash flows. An annuity is a series, a key word here, equal cash flows. I put $50 a month away into my retirement. I put $100 a month away into my kids' education fund. Those are annuities. Or I retire and I give somebody my $300,000 I've saved my whole life, and they cut me a check every month until I die. That's an annuity. I give them a chunk of money. We make a contract. We agree on an interest rate. If I live till I'm 105, that's way sad for them. If I get hit by a bus going home, they keep my $300,000. That's an annuity coming out. So you can pay into an annuity, or you can get money out from an annuity. Okay.
So it pays to go to the annuity.
Well, in this day and age, when they're telling us that kids that are born today are going to live statistically to 110,
All the stupid things people do on the internet.
well, I mean, that's what they're telling us with that kids born today in the United States of America are statistically, the men are going to live to about 106 and the girls to about 110. What do you think that's going to do to the population of the world on top of everything else?
Are they
Huh?
considering junk food and sugar consumption?
Oh, they're just basing it on medical advances. My 85-year-old stepfather just had open heart surgery. Guy smoked, ate bacon sandwiches. Oh, but I mean, they crack his chest and, cleaned out his widowmaker aorta, sewed him back up. He's on, a couple $100 a day worth of meds. So yeah, I mean, annuity business is gonna change dramatically. So which of these is a picture of an annuity? The bottom one, because I'm putting in a buck every time period, aren't I? And so when I get out there in 6 years, I've got my buck, and then the interest on it. And I'm just making this number up because there's still something missing that I can't tell the whole story with until we know. A lump sum is just what it says. It's one chunk of cash. I put in a buck, and I go out here for 6 years, and I earn interest, compounding, and then I got a $1.81. But, add some zeros to that, and all of a sudden you got money, right? So whenever you look at cash flows from projects, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is it? So the salvage value, I think I'm going to sell the solar panels in 15 years for parts. Is that a lump sum or an annuity? It's a lump sum. It happens once. What about the savings in my utility bills that I'm going to harvest? It's an annuity. I get it every year. So it's a pretty easy question to answer, but don't just start throwing stuff down on a piece of paper until you've asked that very basic question, because we're going to take this and go to charts in our books. So we better pull our books. And go to, thought I had it neatly marked, but now it doesn't appear that I do. I think it's at the end of chapter 13. Yeah, page 627. Page 627, it says, Appendix 13B, present value tables, present value of $1, right on their lump sum. Present value of $1 is a technical way of saying present value of a lump sum. On the next page, it says present value of an annuity of $1 in arrears. There's a technical difference about whether you put in your dollar at the beginning or end of a period, obviously. In arrears means at the end of a period. So have we even learned about present value yet, or have we just learned about future value? We've learned about $1 today versus $1 in the future. That's called interest compounding. Present value is exactly the opposite. Present value says I think, now let's just go to something that makes a little bit more sense based on what we've been talking about. I think I'm going to part out these solar panels in 8 years for $500,000. Now the question isn't, what's it going to be worth in the future? I know what it's going to be worth in the future. I want to know what. What's it going to be worth? What is the value in today's dollars? And that's called discounting. So compounding goes into the future, discounting comes back into the present. So what's that $500,000 7 years from now going to be worth in today's dollars? Is that a lump sum or an annuity question? Really? So I'm going to get that over and over and over? Nope, just once. It's a lump sum. Or, I think, so present value is a concept of taking dollars in the future and pulling them back to today. Present value is always going to be less than what? Than the future, clearly, because you're discounting. Because future value is always going to be more because you're compounding. Okay. So an annuity is like, I think those solar panels are going to save me, as Google, $198,000 a year in my utility bills. That's an annuity, right? I think that's going to happen every year. That's present value of an annuity. And you've got two tables, and you got to go make sure that you go to the right table for the factor. So what does it look like you need to ask me based on a cursory glance at those tables? Yeah, what the heck's the percent? You can't get a factor, i.e. one of those numbers in the table, until you know the I. And the I is called a number of things. It's called your discount rate. Well, in capital budgeting, that's what we call it. What's the discount rate? But what that really means, or how you choose your discount rate, and in here, I'm going to just tell you what it is. But again, this is, in the real world, this is pretty freaking critical that you know how to calculate this, because you're going to use, all your numbers are going to be off if you don't choose the right one. It's really, does anybody have a feel for how you decide what your discount rate is? You're talking about big projects, lots of years in the future. How much do I have to pay for my financing to do this? Is Google writing a check for $20 million for their solar panels? No, of course not. You're financing most of these projects. So what's it costing you to get the money to finance them? What are the two ways that you can get the money to finance them?
Can you repeat that one more time? How much do I pay?
What are my financing costs? How much do I have to pay for my money? So if you're looking, for example, to go buy a rental, Monica, and it's going to cost you 3% on your mortgage, how much is that thing going to have to yield you for you to break even? 3%. Anything over 3%, guess what? Profit. Return on investment. Same concept here. How does an organization like Google raise money? What are the two things they do? They sell stock or they sell bonds. They borrow it. What's your cost to capital for stocks? You guys, you should know this. You're accountants. What do we do? What do we pay with stocks? Dividends. What's your cost of capital for bonds? Interest. Ooh. then you got to figure out the mix. I'm going to issue 80% stock and 20% bonds. You can have different kinds of bonds. And what's my dividend rate? It's a pretty complicated calculation to get to, it's called your weighted average cost of capital. Here, the book's just going to go, it's 8%. But that's not how it works. Nobody, the discount rate fairy doesn't descend on your desk. You have to figure that out. And basically what that says is all these projects have to at least return me what it costs to finance them. Okay. Let's try a very, very, very simplified example. 1053. I love this stuff because it's so real. Okay, let's say, what am I doing here? I am investing $150,000 today, or considering, excuse me. This is another huge California thing. If you're a business in California, what are you really worried about? Water. So I'm considering investing in a gray water recycling plant for my business. So it takes my gray water, not my sewage water, but my gray water, like from my sprinklers and my manufacturing equipment and my sinks, and it recycles and purifies it, keeps it going in a circle. Right? And water is really expensive. What do you want to know about this project? Okay, that's this. That's the $150,000 investment that's going to buy the equipment to clean the water.
What's the lifespan of the equipment?
Excellent. The lifespan of this project? Short. What else do you want to know? What am I paying for water?
Is the 3 years just to build it, or is that how long the recycling?
That's how long it's going to produce.
So every 3 years you got to put in another one?
Yeah. That's not true. But those are just the numbers I got sitting here, so work with me. Yeah, what's it going to do? That's exactly the question. How many gallons of water usage is it going to decrease per year? And how much does the water cost me per gallon to process? Da-da-da-da-da. I do all that math. Great questions. That's exactly how you would back into it. And I'm spending $114,000 a year on water costs. Now. Yeah. And if I put this in, my water costs go away. No, they don't go away. I'm sorry. They decrease by 82%. Still got to have some clean water. You're missing one thing, and then we can do the project. How am I going to fund it? And I'm going to fund it. High cost of capital. I'm a startup company, so I don't have really any credit, so I'm going to pay through the hind end for my money. 10%. You have everything you need to know now. Now, how do I set it up? You set up a net present value with 5 columns. I don't know which order they have them in the book. Doesn't matter. Description of what the cash flow is. I've got 3 things here. What are they? 3 kinds of cash flows to consider in this project. What's one of them? Investment. What else? Well, no, the reduction in my cash flow every year. In other words, I'm putting out $114,000 a year for water now. That's going to go down by 82%. What do you want to call that? Yeah, change in what? Inflows or outflows? Outflows. Change in outflow. And then did anybody tap into what I was saying earlier about the tax savings?
Appreciation.
Yeah, tax savings attributable to depreciation. What year is the investment occurring in?
The first year.
Now. What year is the change in cash outflow occurring? Yeah, years 1, 2, and 3. When are the tax savings occurring? What's the original investment? Do I want to bracket that or not bracket it? Bracket it because it's an outflow. Is there a present value factor for a dollar amount that you spent today? It's 100%. Today's dollars are 100% of today's dollars. So this guy right here is the amount times the factor. Pardon me. Oh, I'm sorry, net present value. Net present value. I want you for tomorrow to figure out what you think the amounts and the factors are for the next two. And I guess I do need to tell you a couple more things about the depreciation. It's a straight line, no salvage, and my tax rate is 15%. And read chapter 13 as well. So when we come back on Friday, see if you can finish off this simple little chart. Tell me whether they'd take the project or not. Are these next, is number 2 and 3, are they annuities or lump sums? They sure are because they occur every year. And you know where the table is, and the table's super easy to read. It's years on the left and rates on the right, or on the top. This stuff is fun, fun, fun. Aren't you just having a giggle? Me too. Also super practical for personal financial planning purposes. Yes, ma'am.